Dante, tell us what it is that you do.
What do I do? Well, when Stellar calls, I show up.
Yeah, that's true.
And I lead strategy and global policy for Circle.
And what is your day-to-day like leading global policy and strategy for Circle?
I don't know. I mean, if anybody has been in the crypto industry for as long as I have, I've uploaded the US dollar onto the internet since 2019. Small little stealth mode project called Libra. It's a front row seat into the future of money and payments and banking and all the fun stuff that we're trying to do.
Let me talk about Libra for a second. Do you guys remember Libra? Yeah? Tell us about Libra.
Yeah, is anybody old enough to remember Libra? I mean, look, Libra was in some ways, and we should talk about Circle. Libra was a front row seat into, I think Libra in so many ways was like a heat shield for the industry. And in some ways, I also thought of my job ever since as being crypto's public defender. I mean, the industry has a little bit of a brand problem. But at the same time, it took a project like that to really, really wake up policymakers and regulators on where the established financial system is falling short. And as a result, I would do it all over again.
Well, that's why I wanted to connect it, is you started Libra, or you launched Libra 3 weeks after I started at Stellar. And that was my genesis, my first trip to DC was because of Libra, because I could go to DC and I could say, this is what Stellar does, and this is what Libra's doing.
Yeah, and then by having sort of the Death Star right next to Stellar, I joke, there are a lot of stars in the blockchain universe, but only one of them is Stellar. And when you could compare Libra side by side with Stellar, it was like, you know, Denelle is coming to save the world, save money, finance, open infrastructure. And I'm sitting there going, I just have a white paper. I'm asking for permission, not forgiveness.
Yeah, it was definitely a moment. So then you joined Circle.
Yep.
You've got the Circle socks on.
I got my Circle socks on. My developer team were going to kill me if I showed up at another conference without Circle socks. So somebody zoom in, get that picture for Sam Seeley and Sandra, and at least I could say I did my part.
And so tell me, like, that you've been at Circle for 4 years now?
Yeah.
And how have you seen the growth of Circle?
Yeah, well, so you know, Circle in crypto terms is an OG company. It's an 11-year-old company. USDC is a 5-year-old innovation. We've gone from 0 to 190 plus countries in terms of availability in 5 years. I don't think there is a banking network or a payment network that has that type of geographic reach of any kind anywhere in the world. But at the same time, you know, I think one of the things I care most about, and Jeremy and others care a lot about, is if to build a more inclusive, open financial system comes at the expense of being trusted, regulated, caring about financial crime compliance and integrity, then we've all failed. At the same time, if all we get from all of our efforts and all of your efforts as developers is a digital twin of the existing economy, then I also think we've failed. The point of this effort is to go past the point of diminishing returns in banking and payments. And so when I look back at my tenure at Circle, not only do I feel that in some respects we've vindicated the vision and business model of open, universally accessible digital dollars, we've also vindicated the business model that you could do this in a collective way, right? Developer-first work, partnerships with Stellar and blockchains. And I think there's a lot to be proud of, despite maybe crypto winter turning into a crypto ice age. I think there's a lot we should look back on collectively and be very proud of.
And so I think that USDC issued on Stellar 2.5 years ago or so. We obviously, for us, it was just such an important piece of the puzzle to bring to the users and the builders on Stellar. How do you see the growth now for USDC? Do you see, and I know you also have EuroC, so when we think about like EuroC and USDC, where do you see the growth path for them, and why 2 assets?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a great question. So obviously, we care a lot about the partnership with Stellar. I mean, almost at the very, very darkest point in crypto winter, was the industry searching for its meaning, and Denelle and I are, now that you have to come to DC more often, are often in the hot seat as witnesses in the Senate or in the House. And we look back and rewind the tape at the partnership with UNHCR. A very powerful partnership, which would not have happened but for Stellar. But USDC was the digital dollar to deliver disaster relief in a completely novel way to UN refugees, Ukrainian refugees for UNHCR. Now, I don't think any of us should rest until this stops being a pilot project. Everyone, everywhere in the entire world should be pre-equipped with the infrastructure to get access to money. Most of my career actually has been in risk and insurance and resilience. The crypto stuff just pays the bills. And if you think about it, when we mobilize money in a pandemic, we mobilize money in cross-border payments. Peer-to-peer remittances is the most important cash flow in the entire world. But yet, in a crisis or in a pandemic, you hit both sides of the transaction. The people in emerging countries had to pay a high price and wait forever for their money to show up. And the people sending the money in the diaspora population were told, stay at home and quarantine, or they were losing their jobs.
Right.
And so, but for better infrastructure, better financial rails, and products like USDC, serving as a hard currency and access to dollar, these types of innovations are not possible. So I think if that doesn't motivate us collectively and developers collectively to build side by side better infrastructure for the planet, then what are we doing?
Yeah, I think that is the perfect example of, one of the things that if we hadn't had USDC and brought USDC onto the network, I think the network would have been in a different spot. We needed a really strong dollar-backed asset to be able to deliver that to the builders, and Circle has certainly been that. When I think about the importance of what you look at in terms of, is it velocity, is it volume? How do you think about where you want to see the growth?
Yeah, well, and I don't want to bury the lead on the euro, right?
Yeah.
And of course, this side of the Atlantic and the other side of the English Channel with regulations in Europe. One of the things that the crypto industry has long fought for over so many years is legitimization. And it's one of these fascinating things about our technology and our industry is we have sought and fought for regulatory clarity and the ability to develop in an unfettered manner. Now, getting that ability comes at a price,
Yeah.
right? If you've uploaded the US dollar onto the internet and you pretend that, Janet Yellen doesn't matter and US laws don't matter, then in the long run, you're in trouble. And so we think it's really critical to look at this side of the Atlantic and say, USDC and our euro-denominated stablecoin, EURC, are the two MiCA-compliant stablecoins out of France. That's a powerful step forward because it allows us to build in Europe in a compliant manner for 441 million users across the EU common market. And the EU standard in some ways, while a hard standard, nonetheless enshrines many aspects of blockchain and crypto into law.
Right.
The use of open ledgers, the legal certainty that comes with having a stablecoin treated as electronic money. These are very, very powerful steps forward. And you could argue that in the rest of the world, countries will have to now catch up.
And so when you think about having those two assets, that's why it's important to you. I called it the EuroC. They changed it on me. The EURC.
It used to be EUROC, but...
Yeah. So sorry, EURC. I just realized I screwed that up. When you think about that, what do you want to see? Like, do you want to see them be parallel? Do you really care, like, which one is bigger than the other? Or is it for you, you just want to put them both out there and say, go, builders, go, take it.
Yeah. Well, my French friends and my European friends would argue...
Dante speaks 7 languages, by the way. So he can speak all of this. He can say all of this in 7 languages. I learned that last night. Go ahead.
I'm going to be interviewed by the media later. Thanks a lot. No, of course we want the euro to grow. As a matter of fact, right now, the euro stablecoin is the fastest growing MiCA-regulated stablecoin that is denominated in euros. And I would imagine that a European consumer and market participant would like their currency to be represented on the internet. But it's also really critical that one of the biggest use cases for stablecoins, at least the use case we should all push to unlock, is cross-border payments. In some money movement corridors, if you want to move a lot of money very fast, you might have better outcomes buying a plane ticket, getting a bag of cash, and flying it if you wanted to get there quickly. And so the idea that you could now enjoy on-chain FX in a completely frictionless manner.
Yeah.
Some developer is going to build this. It's not necessarily going to be Circle. It's not necessarily going to be Stellar. And I think that superpower of digital money that is composable and programmable and at the scale of the internet is the point of all of this. And so in the long run, who should be worried if we succeed? And when I say we, I really do mean royal we. It's the incumbent, traditional, almost monopolistic operators in the movement of money. You know, if to be banked requires the classical sort of definition of banking access, we're all in trouble. And the other sort of rhetorical question we should ask is it really your money if you have to ask someone to spend it and pay someone to hold it for you?
Yeah.
And so I think this is crypto's big, at least philosophical superpower, is democratic access to money on little more than a basic internet-connected device.
This is going to be a weird question.
Go for it.
So when you think about what you just said, and you think about what we're trying to do, for example, in the United States, and what I think has already been more successful outside with respect to regulation, when we get regulation that is going to allow traditional financial infrastructure or traditional financial services to come in, what happens then when these banks issue the asset, when these other players come in, when TradFi players come into the space, and are they going to disrupt the disruptors, or how is that going to play?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of an irony, right? I think, I guess quote me on this since I'm on stage, I think it's ironic that the technology that was supposed to make Wall Street irrelevant celebrated the most when Wall Street offered Bitcoin ETFs and crypto started going mainstream. So we should look at that with a degree of irony.
Yeah.
I also think it's a little bit ironic that crypto needs banks more than banks need crypto, which means philosophically that we would all do well in abandoning our anti-establishment narrative.
For sure.
That doesn't mean we succumb to the man at all. It means that you have to think of this technology as, unlike the internet, which was a disruptive technology, I think of blockchain as an augmenting technology. If you get it right, you could augment the features, the benefits, and the value proposition of distinct business models, but you're not necessarily going to disintermediate JP Morgan. And so I've had many a debate with many a big bank. I've had to remind many of the big banks, including the BIS, when they were announcing the so-called Finternet. I said, the Finternet looks and sounds like Libra. Number one, they didn't like that comment.
Do you guys know what the Finternet is?
Finternet is Agustin Carstens and the Bank for International Settlements want to build a global unified shared ledger, which is great, fine. But that to me feels like a Google spreadsheet on Amazon's cloud. The real boss fight in crypto is to defend the open source nature of the wallet infrastructure, the chain infrastructure, and it's not to pick winners and losers in a standards war. Let alone to lock in the incumbents that already enjoy a monopoly. It's to create competition or coopetition. And I think that's the boss fight.
I totally agree with you. I always talk about our work as more of an enhancement to traditional financial infrastructure than a disruptor, in meaning that we're going to disrupt them out of business. I think it's complicated, though, when you think about banks coming into the sector and issuing stable assets and then trying to compete with those folks that have been doing this for a while.
Well, and if I may, Denelle, I've had many a big debate publicly with banks. I've won most of them. Would you want a stablecoin issued by Credit Suisse? Probably not. Why? Because the balance sheet of a bank has a function of creating money and using leverage to create money. And so a stablecoin like USDC, a stablecoin from Paxos, is arguably a much better representation of a dollar and representation of a claim for a dollar because the underlying reserves have no leverage or risk in it. I think these products are the safest dollar-denominated payment innovations on the entire planet.
And I think that this is only true because of the standards that certain of the players in the space adopted even prior to the regulatory environment imposing it.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's actually imposed in the United States right now because there's no regulation on it. So yes, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. Not every asset out there may be the same, but the players that actually have these standards of having the one-for-one backing and making sure that they don't actually create that leverage is an important piece. So you're right.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been working to ensure that this stuff gets enshrined in law. The good parts, right? That financial inclusion, financial innovation, financial integrity are not trade-offs. And this idea that, in order to have open global networks, you must not answer to sanctions, or you must not answer to, making it hard for illicit actors to co-opt good technology. I think this is where the industry again, and the developers and others again, would be very well served, and the regulators and policymakers would be very well served to bring crypto into the perimeter. We're in the City of London. We would be remiss not to acknowledge that in the City of London, a city that has created and completely professionalized industries like insurance, which once upon a time, 330 years ago, was like glorified gambling on betting on whether your ship would ever make it or not, turned that into a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And it would be a shame for the City of London to not also harness this next very critical wave of innovation. Even if some people think of stablecoins like poker chips in a crypto casino, I think of them as always-on digital dollars that don't take bank holidays. This city, like any other major capital, financial capital in the whole world, will be very well served by enabling this technology to exist, to thrive, and to compete, because that's going to define the future.
1000% agree. There's a QR code over there if you want to ask questions. I have a little thing here that you guys can pull your questions up. In terms of where, I'm not going to let you get off the stage without talking a bit about the regulatory environment. You spend a bunch of time kind of all over the world doing this. I know you guys have representation in Singapore. You've done a lot of work in France. You've done a lot of work here, obviously in the United States. Tell me how that feels from where we're moving.
Yeah, and it's hard not to sound, again, optimistic, despite what for a lot of us and a lot of developers feels frustrating. Mm-hmm. Regulators move, if you were putting a regulator and a glacier in a race, the glacier might move fast. Especially, I'm going to have trouble talking to regulators now. Especially.
That's going to be the one snippet. We won't put it up, I promise.
Especially because in many cases, the regulator is regulating yesterday's risk. And we should all look at ourselves in the mirror and say, Do Kwon cost us a lot of money. Sam Bankman-Fried cost the industry a lot of money. And the consequence of reputational risk at that scale is that, guess what? The regulator is going to regulate last year's crisis instead of enable the innovation to continue thriving. So we all have a down payment made of $2 trillion of losses over that period of risk. But I think of it as like, the early internet was a terrifying thing. Early flight was a terrifying thing. But we didn't stop building and or flying and or creating the internet because the worldwide wait was a terrible phase. And I think crypto is now on its other end, broadly. And so, yes, we have a big presence in the US. If I were a betting man, I think we get US stablecoin legislation potentially in the lame duck session as soon as December.
Doesn't that depend on who wins the election?
It does and it does not.
Explain.
It does and it does not. I heard you had a certain Anthony Scaramucci on the stage saying many political things. I've been an advocate of this political notion that crypto is purple in the United States, the blend of red and blue, in part because no matter who wins the White House, you still need consensus, and our industry and our technology is literally all about consensus. You still need consensus in policymakers in order to get a law. And there's nothing better than a US law. Right now, we're using our two pastimes, baseball and lawsuits, in order to get legal clarity from certain agencies in the United States. But there's nothing better than US law.
Well, I didn't actually mean that, so when I said, I was talking about the timing.
Yeah. Oh, no, I won't think we leave 2025, perhaps as soon as the first half of 2025, without legal clarity for stablecoins.
Absolutely. And I think there's a good chance that if Trump wins the election, we'll see that in maybe the first or second quarter of next year, right? Don't you think? If Harris wins,
and then we will airdrop stablecoins on the entire country, and we'll
wait for it. You heard it here.
Yeah. I'm optimistic no matter who wins the election.
Yeah, me too. From a regulatory standpoint, I think it's going to be good for us. I think the timing might be a little different depending on who wins, but I'm hopeful. Do you think we'll also see market structure or just stablecoin? When I say market structure, I mean like who's going to regulate? We're going to take the SEC out of some things in the United States, which I think helps the globe if we can do that.
I think market structure is a harder bill to pass because there's more. When think about it, many will describe the situation in the United States as so dire that I'm leaving America to go build elsewhere.
Yeah.
And Europe, by contrast, might have quote unquote perfect laws on the books, but an imperfect industry. The United States has imperfect laws, but a near perfect industry. Most of the stablecoins in circulation reference the US dollar to different degrees. The only public company in this industry is Coinbase in the United States. And so there's something to be said for this laissez-faire approach that the country has. It's not optimal, but it works. And I do think we'll end up getting laws. The message, of course, to developers is, we need to ensure we get laws that continue to enable the all ships rising side of crypto, as opposed to laws that are so heavy-handed and prescriptive that no one can operate under them.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic.
And then when you think about circles, you have 2 assets now. Are you contemplating more?
Yeah. Not immediately. Partly because I don't know if anybody has uploaded a national currency onto the internet. It's the fastest way to getting summoned by the central bank and by the regulator and the policymaker. I tried. No, I think what we're trying to really build now is many, if not most of the world, knows Circle as a stablecoin issuer. A lot of what we also care about is the developer ecosystem and abstracting away the friction of building on blockchains. And so a big part of our technology investments, things like the cross-chain transfer protocol, are all about interoperability in the digital asset ecosystem and building a safe and sound internet of value that works for everyone. And so, yeah, fewer currencies, more tech.
Yeah. And so when you think about, I always say that right now the interoperability amongst and between chains, you can use bridges. Sometimes people get concerned about that an asset issuer like Circle is the one who sits sort of in that space to be able to be that. Do you think we'll ever come up with a secure, decentralized way to be able to do that, that we feel very important, that we feel like we can operate, meaning the bridges are more safe and all?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think CCTP is a very, very critical piece of infrastructure designed to exactly address the irony of bridges up until CCTP is that it became a single source of failure in crypto infrastructure and a honeypot where all kinds of bad things could accrue. And so I think being able to move assets safely across chains and not subject coin holders or token holders to potentially obsolete chains or chains that don't have the right developer ecosystem is just a critical piece of innovation. Interoperability should be the goal. Openness is the goal. And again, I think the work that you're doing, Denelle, at Stellar, and the work that obviously is happening in your ecosystem is really critical. The market is not going to trust this stuff just because the tech alone works. They're going to trust it because we put personhood, good people, and good communities behind it.
Which is your favorite chain?
So this is where we get to channel the Lord of the Rings reference, one chain to rule them all. I said already, there's a lot of stars in the sky. One of them is Stellar.
That's one. I like to say the only one that shines the brightest is Stellar. Thank you for coming, Dante.
Thank you, Denelle.
Grateful to have you here.
Thank you.